Welcome back to Beyond the Crisis, Road to Economic Recovery.
The path to recovery is for everyone, but there's a view that the needs of women in the workforce and in business must be part of the conversation. Here's a global perspective. Figures from UN Women show that the labor force participation rate for women between the ages of 25 and 54 is 63% compared to 94% for men. In 2017, global unemployment rates for men stood at 5.5%, but 6.2% for women. The share of women in informal employment in developing countries was 4.6 percentage points higher than that of men. Worldwide, 58% of women report having a bank account at a formal financial institution compared to 65% for men. It's in this context that the concept of women's economic empowerment becomes significant and remains relevant here in Jamaica. That's according to President of the Women Entrepreneurs Network of the Caribbean, Ethnie Miller Simpson.
Economic empowerment in a nutshell is really about women finding their financial power. There are many instances where we're very confident, we know exactly what we're doing, and we try to do our work, we are involved in enterprise, etc. But you find that we're not able to move forward because the economic empowerment component is missing. And that particular component is instrumental in our success, where if a woman is not able to feed herself, take care of her bills, take care of her obligations, that leads us to finding alternate ways of doing so. The problem with that is, as we've seen, historically, is that yes, women are doing well, but there is still a gap, there's still an issue, there's still something holding us back. And we found that if women are economically empowered, able to pay their way, find their own resources, as a result, they perform better. And we've also seen that there is less of a dependency on men financially. And women who are economically empowered tend to rise faster in industry, do far better when they own their enterprises, are able to make their decisions. And by the way, women do make better decisions, as we've seen in the data, than men. But the lack of a financial power base limits us quite a bit. The development of that in Jamaica, we should be happy that we are where we are. We've had quite a few hurdles passed. We've had, persons internationally as well as locally talking about the progress of women. We've seen where women are able to not just work in the homes, no, but they're able to work anywhere. However, even though we've seen huge successes in terms of industry and women in Jamaica being, in terms of managers. We've heard all of the data about that success for women. We've seen where women are managers and you have more managers that are women in business, but yet still we do not have enough female CEOs. So there is still an issue.
Also, financing enterprises remains an issue for women in business.
When we look at how many women go after commercial loans and find funding and perform well, that is still an issue. More women are going to the microfinancing sector when they're borrowing rather than going to the commercial sector. And it begs the question of, is there something inherently built into some of our industries that prevent women from getting ahead, prevent us from accessing those loans? Even though we repay loans far better than men, we find that we still are not able to provide the collateral that is required or the type of collateral that is being requested. Women just don't have that because traditionally, many of us have never owned land and never owned or equipment, etc. So there is still a problem. There is still need for conversation, but we are now seized with impatience of conversation because we talk and talk and talk, and then the action does not happen. So we now need to start talking about exactly what are the actions that need to be taken to move us forward, and making sure that we are at the table. We're still ignored, or sometimes the women who are chosen to be at the table are not the ones who will have the will to push some issues forward.
Miller Simpson explains that the organization she now leads was formed to support and place a special focus on women in growth. This is while there are opportunities for financing startup businesses, there was a gap as it relates to accessing financing for expanding ventures.
we recognized that for most of us, the dynamics were these. One, we had an idea for a business. We were brave enough to start. In starting, you bootstrapped your business. So you find all that money out of your pocket. And as you are earning, you're putting the money back into the business. The funding was not there for women in growth. And we decided we wanted to focus on that particular segment of the market. So the profile of women in business for us is that we focus on women in growth. And that means a woman who has started her business, there's proof of concept. She has done some of the legwork to get to where she is now currently. It is possible that those women may even have accessed funding in some way, shape or form from friends, family, some type of investment, angel investment, but it's still not enough. So we are recognizing now that we've done some work in that area. However, we still need to push a little further, because when you start talking about scaling your business now, you can't bootstrap that so easily. So we are now at the conversation point of, where do we now find that funding? How do we access that funding? Are women open to the terms associated with that funding? Even getting to the point of, is there any bank that is amenable to focusing on women? And let me tell you, a lot of the commercial banks give lip service to helping women.
According to Miller Simpson, members of her network have raised several challenges arising out of the COVID experience, which she wants to be placed on the table for attention and action.
The fact that our businesses disappeared overnight. And we're hardest hit because some of us are in the informal economy. Some of us are, as we said, micro businesses. And we are service type businesses, more service type businesses than product. So one of the things that came out was we have high electricity costs. We've seen what has happened with JPS and the devaluation of the dollar and so on. And we've had informal conversations with JPS officials. We're actually going to be a part of a formal meeting shortly. And to say, as women in business, this area we have similarities with men, but as women in business, we have these nuances. Is there any space for us to have, a different conversation? One of the things too that we are empowering our group to look at is looking at the industries that women are not generally in. So energy, for example, is an area that we need to look at. Agriculture, yes, we have women in agriculture, but not as owners. And also more women in agriculture are on a different end of the spectrum. How can we change that? What are the energy issues pertaining to farming or manufacturing? So all of that conversation. Another thing that came up in our group, apart from energy, is also raw materials and sourcing and procurement. One of the things that we'd love to ask the government to do is to carve out a 5% in terms of government procurement for just women. So therefore, when you're bidding on projects, then you have the Ministry of Industry now has this portal that you can go and check to see what is available, but it's still just wide open. Can we, just to get more women business owners involved, can we have a 5%? I think it was being proposed for 20%. I'd ask them to give us a 5 or 10%. Keep 10%, that is, just general. But you are encouraging, you're trying to get more women at the table.
With the several businesses struggling due to the impact of the pandemic and the problem of accessing to financing being one of the top complaints of micro, small and medium-sized enterprises generally, why is a targeted approach to women needed?
Because when you look at the life of a woman and how she has to operate, men and women do not have the same challenges. So for example, 35-year-old female or 40-year-old female who has children, once you bring in children, it changes everything. And persons have said, is it possible then that women who are unmarried who do not have children don't necessarily have those issues? That's correct. I'll give an example. I remember we had a board meeting, and one of our members was late. She had just changed careers. So she was no longer working in the financial sector. She had been bold and she said, I'm going to start my own business. And she did. She was late for that board meeting. We knew she was going to be late. And when she arrived, she just sat there and she said, oh my goodness. And that lady explained why she was late. All of the challenges pertaining to caring for her children, picking up, dropping off. And then she started sharing information, which we all knew because I was in banking at one point in time, in a corporate environment where women raise their children under their desks in many companies in this country. It's not spoken about. When, for example, a woman is identified for development, and I am a trainer by profession, and I work with many corporate entities here, some of those women cannot take up those opportunities. So if we're going to say that there's no need, that answers the question. A woman who is identified for development and she wants to succeed, she wants to move ahead, just like her male counterpart. But the male counterpart very often, and this is not set in stone either, he has a wife, a girlfriend, who he can leave his children with, or a mother. And that doesn't necessarily happen for women who want to get ahead. So some of those challenges are not just for women in business, they're for women, period. So it's across the board.
A decent work agenda must be on the cards as the government looks to restructuring the economy.
In the restructuring of the economy is to look to see which industries are hardest hit or were hardest hit by COVID and will be hardest hit again if we have a similar pandemic. The industries that are affected most by COVID, but also that you find more women in. I want to just share that there's a framework created by the ILO that looks at decent work program. It's called WENC. It's operational in Cambodia as well as Vietnam and other countries that we could look at as an example. We should also be looking at the institutional capacities of the agencies involved in women's entrepreneurship, development, and gender equality. I say that against the background of during COVID, if a woman is identified as having COVID, positively identified, we had concerns about where she would go, where she would be housed, how would that be handled? And we raised that concern because if you're sending that person to a shelter and they are COVID positive, and I don't think that that has been addressed publicly. It may have been said and I missed it, so I'd be happy to hear more about it, but we raised that as a concern. The other thing is looking at the enabling environment. We're still, as a woman in business, the different agencies look at people as a group. They don't look at women versus men and then table the different instruments and the environment to reflect that. I mentioned that in terms of financing. It's the same too where when we're doing a training session for business persons, what time of day are you having it? Under what conditions are you having it? One of the things that we talked about as an organization was to identify, what do we call it, a creche? And even look at a model around that where the creche supports training sessions that involve women generally and not just women in business. So a woman executive as well as a woman business owner could access something like that. So it is coming up with those ideas that support women a whole lot more so that our productivity can go through the roof, just like a man's productivity can go through the roof.
And the time for action, she says, is now, as real changes need to happen in the Jamaican society and economy.
COVID has shown us that nothing is ever going to be the same, and that's a good thing. So what it means is that I see an opportunity for change, real change. And there's a lot that I'm waiting to see what the government is going to put forward, what private sector is going to be putting forward, because there is no need for us to hold on to some of the structures that we had before, even some of the legislation, it's outdated. Yeah. So therefore, what exactly are we going to do that's different? And the beautiful thing is that as entrepreneurs, when we sit and we talk together, you're hearing this and you're hearing ideas and you're like, oh, I wonder if we could try this and I wonder if we could do that. And the minute you raise some ideas, you're like, people respond and say, no, that can't work because I'm tired of that. And I'm not the only one who feels that way. There must be change. Our society cannot continue the way how it has continued got to this point. It just cannot continue. And we cannot sit and wait to have those conversations.
All views and voices must contend on the road to economic recovery.
That was Beyond the Crisis, Road to Economic Recovery.